Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. Liking the video helps out so much. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I do post content just like this as often as I can. Roughly every 5 days is what I usually aim for. Anyways, sit back. Enjoy the horror stories with no mid-roll ads. Except for the ad break after this intro, there will not be any more after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. It took me about a half hour to drive to Mrs. Crabtree's house. I'm fine, just get there. Since I've technically finished both of the supervised visits I'm required to do, I was voluntold to spearhead a solo shift. I can handle it. I looked through that binder Natalie gave me. Irregular breathing, glassy eyes, mottled discoloration on the feet and knees. The last few times Natalie and I worked Mrs. Crabtree's house, nothing of note even happened. I just doom-scrolled on my phone for most of the 12 hours I was there. Half the time she's not lucid enough to acknowledge anyone in the room. For the most part, Natalie handles all the family stuff. I'm just there to be a sponge, take notes, go through the steps. Natalie called out today. We're already so understaffed as it is. She's my lifeline, as embarrassing as that is to admit. 10 minutes away now. I had to get gas on the way there. This always passes. I just have to ride it out and do my job. I skimmed that binder. I know I did. Every single page I flipped through is sitting in my bag right now, and I can feel all of them. 5 minutes away now. I'm met at the door by a disheveled woman. Her eyes bloodshot, her nose runny. She's wearing the same pair of pajamas she was wearing a week ago. She managed to eat today. That's a better sign, right? I mean, it was only a bit of jello and chicken broth, but... Yes, that's a very good sign, I tell the woman. She thanks me anyway. Inside, the house looks no different than the last time I was here. Before I even start doing anything, I have to go through my notes and do some pre-charting. Diagnosis already filled in. Lewy body dementia. The brain degenerates. The body does what it wants. Code status. Do not resuscitate. Already documented. Oral intake, 1 jello cup and some chicken broth. Cognition status. Disoriented ×3. Mobility status. Bedbound. The woman told me she asked for food on her own today. First time since coming home from the hospital. I asked if she'd managed any full sentences since our last visit. She thought about it for a second. Not exactly, she said. Her mother would start talking, but it was like she was picking up a conversation from somewhere else. Days ago. Months. Maybe years. Like coming back to a video and it plays where you left off. In the living room, a man sits in a chair. Eyes locked on the screen, not really watching it. When my grandfather was passing, I locked myself in my room and didn't come out until it was time. I asked the woman if there's a specific pattern she noticed. Maybe a word. A particular subject she can't let go of. She says her mother has been narrating things out loud, step by step, like she's teaching someone. Only her hands don't match what she's saying. She'll talk about folding towels, but her fingers just keep doing the same thing. Opening and closing, opening and closing. Same motion every time, like she's grabbing something that isn't there, hours at a time. Only stopping when she finally falls asleep again. LBD patients do weird things with their hands. It's in the binder somewhere. So, how long? The man asks me. I tell him I won't know specifics until I go up there and check her vitals. When I checked on her this morning, she kind of recognized me, or at least seemed more aware of her surroundings, he says. I tell him that's a good sign. That any deviation from her dull, confused state is a small victory. His tone only barely shifts. But what are we celebrating? that she's one step closer to knowing what's about to happen. I continue up the stairs. I don't have a response. The last time I checked on her, she was sound asleep, he says. We make it to her room. I lightly knock and make my way in. At the edge of the bed, Mrs. Crabtree is sitting upright, eyes fixated forward, completely still. I open my bag, take blood pressure, then pulse ox, go through the list. She isn't moving no matter what I do, failing to react to anything. The man and the woman look worse than they did downstairs. The woman comes over, places a hand on her mother's shoulder, frantically trying to get her to react in any way. It's me. Hey, where do you think you're going? Can you hear me? Hey, Mom, tell me what's going on. You're supposed to be laying down. Still nothing. I managed to slip through the cuff in the gap between her shoulder and upper body and secure it to her arm. The man is still in the doorway, just standing still and watching, his grip on the door handle getting tighter as the scene unfolds. The woman turns to me. Why isn't she moving? Why isn't she reacting? What's happening to her? Blood pressure is done. 118/76. That can't be right. Her charts show a steady downward trend, consistent with decline. The last time I took a reading, it was hovering around 88/54. Before that, 94/60. The cuff must not be calibrated correctly. I take it off, hit the reset button, then try again. No change. The woman looks to me for answers. The cuff tightens. 118/76. Same reading. I tell the woman to step back a bit. She's still angry, justifiably so. I tell her it's okay. No, it's not. That I've seen this before. No, I haven't. That her blood pressure is about the same as it was last time. The woman moves aside as the man finally steps into the room. He convinces her to calm down, that I'm doing my job, to give me space. They leave the room and I hear their muffled conversation outside the door. Pulse ox is next. Remember the steps. Make sure you actually turn it on. I hold down the button. The lights flash. I hear the beep. It's working. O2 sat, 98%. Pulse rate, 80. That number is wrong. Take it again. No change. Probably because I got this one from the clearance aisle at CVS. Natalie gave me the one from the facility. Same numbers as before. No decrease or increase. I noted in the chart. When the next nurse gets here, I'll use theirs. It's fine. I begin my neurological assessment. Touching her shoulder yields nothing. Saying her name doesn't work either. Still not moving. I take out my pen light to check her pupils and see if she can track my movement. Eyes are still forward. Pupils are severely dilated. No constriction after shining the light either. I fight the urge to call Natalie. No, not on my first solo shift. It's fine. Autonomic dysfunction is common with LBD patients. Pupil abnormalities can happen. I wave the light back and forth again. No visual tracking. Too risky to try repositioning her. Fall risk patient found seated at edge of bed, unassisted, unable to move without risk of injury. Will continue to monitor. A few pillows behind her and to the side, and some to the front should suffice. Outside the door, the muffled conversation is barely audible but still carries the same urgency it did when it first began. Heading downstairs, the woman was mid-sentence. Attention immediately focused on me. How is she? Did she move? Did she say anything? The answers come almost word for word from the chart, albeit a bit nicer and less clinical. She isn't having it. Before anything else is said, she's halfway up the stairs. My pace matches her urgency. At her room now, the door is wide open. The pillows are back in their original places. Mrs. Crabtree laying on her back, deep into sleep. The woman lets out a sigh of relief. She thanks God that her mother is okay. sleeping in bed as if the last 10 minutes never happened. She lowers her voice. Distant sounds of the TV make the quiet a bit more bearable. I stare at the pillows. Can't dwell on what we saw. Fall risk patient resting in bed. No signs of injury. Will continue monitoring. The next few hours drag on. Mrs. Crabtree has been sleeping since the last assessment. Her breathing patterns have become a bit more laborious. Not the exact kind to watch out for, but worth a mental note. The anxiety has calmed down a bit ever since the man and the woman also took it upon themselves to nap. Back to phone scrolling and occasional staring contests with the window. Nothing really interesting worth looking at. Rural Texas has trees, grass, and more trees. With the occasional bobcat or coyote making their way through both. The cell service is decent at least. One of the few small towns that actually has 5G towers, which is about as close to a compliment it's going to get. Feeling restless? I go downstairs to get a cup of coffee and find the TV on but the man absent. Still asleep somewhere. Can't blame him. On my way back up, the unmistakable sound of an EAS warning blares. This is not a test. Shelter in place. Avoid windows. There's more warnings here than actual emergencies. You get used to tuning it out. Back in the room now, Mrs. Crabtree is still sleeping. Same routine as before. Scrolling, listening for changes, rinse and repeat. Her breathing is noticeably different now. Not the labored rhythm noted a few hours ago. Slower. The gaps between breaths are stretching. Exhale, silence. The stopwatch reads 15 seconds. Downstairs, the muffled conversation between the man and the woman is getting louder. They're awake now. Exhale, silence, 20 seconds. My urge to go tell them slowly building. No, have to make sure it's actually happening. Exhale, silence, 30 seconds. If only Natalie were here. Just keep counting. Exhale, silence, 45 seconds. I think about my own loss years ago and the similarities. Exhale, silence. Once you hear the death rattle, they go from days to hours. It's a checklist, she'd tell me. 15 years of watching people die the same way. Anything becomes clockwork. Staring at Mrs. Crabtree for any signs of life, I go from actively counting breaths to feeling for when the pulse finally stops. 2 fingers on her wrist. Still there. Slowing down now. The conversation downstairs getting louder in my head. Pulse is growing weaker, harder to place. Should I call Natalie? No, I can't. Don't have it in me. I could be wrong about it anyway. One more beat. Silence. Nothing. I just sit in the room. The time reads 3:28 p.m. Looking at the door I need to open feels paralyzing. Natalie is usually here to handle any and all family stuff. I'm just here to be the sponge, to write everything down, administer meds, help in any way I can without having to worry about saying the wrong thing. There's a man and a woman down there dreading the news I'm about to bring them. The time says 4:30 p.m. Mrs. Crabtree has been laying in the same position since I noted her last heartbeat, walking over to her for one last check before I rip the band-aid off. I notice that her eyes are completely open, not partially closed, not closed at all, wide open. Not terribly uncommon with death. Perimortem muscle relaxation. It's in one of those binder sections, I'm sure. I grab my pen light and shine it on them. The pupils immediately contract. The time now reads 4:45 p.m. Grabbing my binder, I flip through the section on ocular nerves. Nothing is helping me. I have no frame of reference for this. Did I miscalculate the breaths? The pulse? What possible reason could there be for her eyes to be responsive now? I place my fingers on her wrist again. It's cold. Nothing beats under my fingers. Maybe a bad area of circulation. I try the other wrist. Nothing. Same temperature. Her neck next. Nothing. My final test is putting my head against her chest. Still nothing. Not one single heartbeat. Yet her pupils contract every time I shine the light on them. If there's any time for my pulse ox to actually work, now would be great. I get it out, reset it, place it on my finger. Working normally, 110 BPM, 95%. Taking it off, I reset it once more, and pry Mrs. Crabtree's finger off the side of the bed. Clipping it on, it gives a flat line for the BPM, but an oxygen level of 35%. Something can't have oxygen saturation without a heart to pump it. No rise and fall of the chest either. Taking the temperature now, I get a reading of 94.8 Fahrenheit. The thermostat by the door reads 72. I have to be wrong. Peripheral shutdown. Page 32A. Section D12. As the body declines, the veins on the arms get more visible. Pulse slows down. Body temperature fades. Consistent with my notes. A sudden knock on the door. The man and the woman must have heard the rapid shuffling of feet, and the time I thought I had to rationalize everything happening in their absence has come to an abrupt end. In front of me is a patient that defies explanation. Behind me is a family waiting for one. As the door opens, the old woman lay motionless in her bed, eyes now closed once again, no pulse to account for, no signs of life. I tell the woman in the doorway that her mother's vitals are about the same as when she took her nap earlier. She asks me if her mother said anything. I tell her no, that she's been quiet. The woman pauses and stares into me. I've seen that exact look. From Natalie. Without saying anything, she makes a beeline for her mother. She grabs her hand. It's cold, but she's always cold now. Stiff, but her arthritic hands haven't been any different. She looks over to me, teary-eyed, asking how much longer she has. I don't answer. The woman doesn't wait for one. She steps out, the sound of her feet descending the stairs once more. Alone in the room again. Her chest is rising and falling. Agonal breathing. Seen this many times in the ER, especially with cardiac arrest patients. The body hasn't caught up yet. Doesn't mean she's alive, but that happens when someone drops suddenly, not gradually. A heart attack, trauma, not someone who's been declining for months. Her heart didn't stop without warning. It wound down, not the same thing. Have to get back to charting. Patient resting comfortably, vitals obtained, blood pressure unable to obtain due to patient positioning. Respirations shallow and irregular. Will continue monitoring. Just as I finish writing, one of her fingers is moving, tensing and flexing back and forth. Only one. The index finger on her right hand. The same one that gave me a flat line with an oxygen level of 35%. It happens on the other hand. Index finger flexing back and forth. Her eyes are still closed. The chest has stopped moving again. The movement of her fingers on her right hand is now a fluttering motion, perfectly in sync with her left. 10 minutes pass. The fingers haven't stopped. Every time I glance at her, the motion is still there. Steady, synchronized. Can't dwell on it. Chart needs finishing. Fine motor tremors noticed in bilateral index fingers, consistent with LBD symptomatology. Fine motor tremor. No other changes noted. Will continue to monitor. Time for another neurological assessment. I grab my pen light to check the pupils again, expecting to have to lift her eyelids. Nope. Open. Constricting pupils just like before, but no other movement to note. Moving the light back and forth horizontally yields nothing. Still looking ahead. Moving the pen vertically is when the eyes lock on to the light. The time now reads 5:02 p.m. I don't know how long I've been standing here, or when exactly I put the pen light away, but it's now in the pocket of my binder, My first instinct is to open it, flip the page that has all the answers. The hum of the air conditioner is loud now. Looking down at the old woman again, her eyes are still open, fixated on the area where the pen light was shining from, eyes not moving. Checking her pupils again with the pen light, the vertical track from earlier, gone. Not tracking vertically or horizontally now, eyes still in the same general direction they were. Pupils are contracting again when the light hits, this time at the exact same rate, both returning to the exact same size, like watching two camera apertures synced together. Her fingers start back up, moving faster with both sets flexing and twitching in a choppy, glitch-like rhythm. Arms are motionless at her sides, the wrists turn toward me. I take a step back, my eyes watching her hands. I nearly trip on the chair behind me. She stops. Everything does. My phone vibrating cuts through the silence. Natalie. Hey, just checking in. My bad about today. I couldn't stop throwing up last night and I woke up with, like, a fever of 103. Throat is killing me too. How's Crabtree doing? She doing okay? Me. No, you're fine. It's been alright here. She's been very quiet. Not a whole lot changed since last time, lol. Oh, okay. Good to hear. How's Jake and Allison? Jake and Allison. I type back. They're coping in their own way, I think. Jake has been glued to the TV most of the day, and Allison has come up to check a few times, but she's been sleeping, so not a whole lot of back and forth conversation going on. And then she replies. She mentioned any changes before you got there? Or was she awake yet? Me. Just that she's been moving irregularly, muscle spasms, repeated hand motions, that sort of thing. Consistent with LBD symptoms so far. Natalie. You notice anything weird about her breathing yet? Her heart rate? Me. Only slightly. When I took vitals earlier, everything was pretty normal. Heart rate a bit slower from time to time. About as normal as it can be for what's happening, I guess. Natalie. That fits. If you need anything, let me know, okay? I'm gonna try and get more sleep, but don't feel bad for waking me up if you have any questions. Also, be careful when you leave. The roads are backed up really bad right now. Me. Thanks a lot, and I will. Me. Do you know what happened? Huge pileup on I-35. Ambulance just swerved into oncoming traffic going like 90. Whoa. Right? I'm wondering if the dude had like a medical episode or something. Seizure maybe? I don't know. I just saw a clip show up on my feed and instantly recognized the exit. Anyway, talk to you later. Good luck, you got this. Text me before you leave. Or call. Will do, thanks. I put my phone down. Nothing. Well, not exactly nothing. Her head, it shifted, in the direction where I was standing. The time is now 5:15 p.m. I can see small muscle flexes in her cheek, a faint sound from her mouth, almost too quiet to hear. Teeth on teeth. Come to think of it, she's the only geriatric I've met that actually still has them. Had. At this point, the specifics betray everything I've ever known. I'm way too restless to deal with it right now. Being sedentary for this long is making my legs fall asleep, and I can hear the sounds of someone washing dishes and the faint beeps of a microwave keypad downstairs. Seems weird if I don't make an attempt to at least try and socialize with them. Downstairs, the man is in front of the sink, scraping grease off a very expensive-looking cast-iron skillet. The woman is on FaceTime with someone, sitting curled up on the couch, surrounded by empty water bottles and crumpled up balls of tissue. I make my way into the kitchen. My dad has one just like that, I say to the man. He nearly took my head off when I told him I put it in the dishwasher. Oh, I would have been livid, he says, half laughing. What's the deal with that anyway? Does it render it completely unusable or something? Well, no. but the way cast iron works, you have to season it. It's like you spread a thin layer of oil on it and then put it in the oven so it forms this like non-stick coating that bakes onto the metal. Helps it not rust and stuff. So what does soap do? Removes the coating and makes it a pain in the butt to deal with. I'm not very versed on cookware, and the subject isn't particularly that interesting, but it's a good break from everything happening today. That makes sense. Yeah, and it usually takes like multiple times in the oven before it's done right anyway. Right. Where's y'all's bathroom at? Keeping a conversation going has also not been a strong suit of mine either. Through the living room, right as you get to the front, on the left. The woman, phone in hand, is now up from the couch, pacing back and forth in the living room. I can hear her talking about her mother, about how she's been, that her favorite hobbies are currently sleeping and staring at the wall. Her voice trails off as I shut the door. The stairs feel longer on the way up. I hear the woman talking. Her voice has an optimistic tone to it, or as much as I can discern from down here. She's speaking to her mother softly. I can't make out what she's saying. I'm halfway up the stairs, getting closer to the door. Hey, you going somewhere again? The old woman is standing next to the bed facing the doorway, gaze fixed in place. You can hear me, right, Mom? I'm right here. Mrs. Crabtree, what you doing, hun? Can you tell me what's going on? I know she can't, but it helps keep up appearances if I at least entertain the idea. She keeps turning her head every time I move around. Hasn't moved a muscle otherwise. Was she doing anything like this earlier? Where were you? I don't have a response. What are you looking at? Hey, Mom. The old woman's head snaps to look at her daughter, tracking her hand movement. Hey, look at me, okay? You're okay. Can you hear me? As soon as the woman's hand pulls away from her mother's cheek, the old woman grabs her wrist with both hands. Mom, hey, you're okay, what's... Before she can finish, the old woman's teeth dig into her daughter's wrist. She's frantic, swearing at the pain, trying to process what's happening. Get her off. I need to call someone now. I have to. She won't let go. Right now is when I'd have a security guard to flag down, a button to press to get immediate help. Allison, just stay right there. Don't move. I can't. Backing away now, I hear Jake downstairs still cleaning dishes. The sound of the pots and pans clanging must have covered it. I'm calling 911. You're okay. You're okay, I promise. Just try not to move her. She's locked in place. The old woman's grip on her wrist is not letting up. Blood is now pooling from the spot she's latched onto. I back away into the hallway, phone in hand. Type in the number. It rings. You have reached emergency services. All operators are currently busy. Please stay on the line and do not hang up. Your call will be answered in the order it was received. I'm not even supposed to be awake. It's a school night, and my dad would lose his mind if he knew I was still scrolling on TikTok at 2 a.m. But my brain wouldn't shut off. My room feels hot and itchy. I needed some water. The house was stupid quiet, not the peaceful type, the heavy kind. I pushed open the kitchen door and the floor squeaked under my heel, loud in the dark. I grabbed a glass and let the tap run, staring at that tiny reflection in the window. My eyes looked tired. Then I heard a crunch, then another, then two more. It kept going. Footsteps, slow and steady, rhythmic almost. I froze, holding my glass halfway to my mouth. Raccoons don't walk like that. Neither do deer. This was human. I killed the kitchen light so whoever it was wouldn't see me, then eased up on the blinds with 2 fingers. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. It was Darius. Barefoot, walking towards the trees behind my house. He walked with purpose, almost like he was being pulled by a rope. His arms hung loose by his sides. His head didn't look around. Darius wasn't wearing a jacket, though it was cold enough to see my breath fog the window. In fact, he wasn't even shivering. He just walked, straight, silent, smooth, like he had rehearsed it hundreds of times. My mouth dried out. I didn't even think, just whispered, "Darius, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't stop. Though why would he? It's not like he could hear me. He just kept walking. I stepped outside, barefoot on the freezing cement, breath shaking in front of me. "Darius," I said again. "Dude, are you good?" Nothing. Not a single reaction. He reached the first line of trees and disappeared into the dark. I stood there for what seemed like hours waiting for him to come back out. He didn't. Eventually, I went inside, locked the door and laid in bed, staring at the ceiling until the moonlight faded to sunlight, feeling like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. By the time I got to school, it felt like I'd been hit by a bus. No sleep and a looping mind. Made me feel like crap. I walked into first period and my heart actually skipped. Darius was already in his seat, wearing clean clothes, hair perfect, smiling at the worksheet in front of him. He couldn't actually be excited to be awake at this time. "Yo," I said as I slid into the desk next to him, voice low. "Where'd you go last night?" He looked up at me with a calm expression I'd never seen on him. Darius is usually twitchy, always tapping his pencil, bouncing his leg and cracking stupid jokes. But this version blinked once, really slow. "What do you mean?" he said. "I went to bed early." "You were outside my house," I said, "like at 2. He tilted his head like a confused dog. "I wasn't anywhere near your house, Malcolm." He said it so logically, so politely, I almost doubted myself. Almost. The weirdness didn't stop there. At lunch, this girl named Maya, who literally had a whole EpiPen situation because she's allergic to strawberries, sat down with a yogurt cup that had bright red chunks in it. Her friend said, "Maya, isn't that dangerous for you?" Maya just smiled with a distant look and said, "Are you calling me fat?" She said it jokingly. In my memory, she had never made a funny joke before. This was out of character. But then she ate it like nothing was wrong. In third period, my math teacher gave a whole explanation about linear quotations without blinking. Not once. I stared at her eyes the whole time. They stayed still, glass-like, terrifying. By the time the final bell rang, I felt like my brain was unspooling. My shirt felt too tight, my hands were shaking, my heart wouldn't slow down. I kept thinking about Darius disappearing into the woods and coming back out like nothing happened, like someone pressed reset on him. I ended the day whispering to myself, "What the hell is happening?" And for the first time in my entire life, other than when my uncle was staying over, I was scared to go home. I actually slept. Not great sleep, the kind where you wake up 10 times and your dreams feel like blurry static, but enough that my head wasn't pulsating anymore. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was leaking through my blinds in these soft yellow bars. I almost convinced myself that yesterday didn't happen, that maybe I was tired, hallucinating, being dramatic. But then I remembered how Darius walked, the bare feet, the blank face, and the weird things at school. It all piled into my chest. I needed answers. I couldn't sit in my room scrolling on TikTok all day, pretending nothing happened. So I got dressed, grabbed a hoodie, and decided to go back towards the woods. Not the spot behind my house. I didn't want to see Darius again. I went the other direction, deep, past the creek, then past the hiking trail, as far as my legs would take me. The woods felt corrupt the further I walked. Quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no crunch of animals, just my own breathing and the wind brushing through branches. About 2 miles in, I saw it. An old barn leaning sideways, too tired to stand straight. Red paint peeling off, rust on the metal roof, broken windows. It looked abandoned for years. I don't know why I felt pulled to it. It wasn't curiosity, but a feeling in my stomach dragging me to it, step by step. I opened the door. It groaned open slow. It was warning me. Inside, the place smelled gross, dust, mold, and something else. Something putrid, rotten. It smelled like raw meat left out in the sun. The floorboards creaked underneath my shoes. Light leaked through the holes in the roof in skinny little beams. My foot hit a loose plank. I looked down. The board shifted and the smell got 10 times worse. I crouched down and pried it up with my fingers. Even though everything in my brain screamed stop, the wood broke surprisingly easily, like someone had opened it before. I lifted the plank and I saw faces. People, stacked like trash bags, gray skin, twisted arms, half covered in dirt, eyes open on some, closed on others. I recognized some immediately. Maya, hair still in a bun, but her skin pale and sunken, her lips blue. Darius, the real Darius, jaw slack, shirt torn, blood on his cheek. I stumbled back so fast I hit the wall behind me. My chest felt like it was collapsing. My eyes burned. I couldn't breathe. I vomited a lot. The truth hit me like my dad does. The Darius at school yesterday wasn't Darius. The Maya at lunch wasn't Maya. They were fakes. Copies. Something wearing their faces. I wanted to run, but before my body could move, footsteps right outside the barn. Heavy, slow. I froze. Someone was here. I dropped to the ground and crawled behind an old metal feeding trough. My heart was beating so loud I was convinced whoever it was could hear it. The barn door creaked open. A man walked in, tall, wearing dirty jeans, mud up his legs. His shoulders were hunched, head hung low, shaking slightly like he was trying to fight off a migraine. I didn't recognize him. He walked to the center of the barn, stood perfectly still, lifted his head toward the ceiling, reached into his jacket, and in an instant he held a gun in his hands. My hand was shaking so hard, it hit the trough with a tiny ding. The man turned in my direction. He spotted me instantly. We made eye contact. He put the gun to his temple, and with a tear rolling down his cheek, he collapsed. My ears rung. I slapped my hand over my mouth, tears filling my eyes. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe because the worst part hadn't even started yet. The man's body twitched, at first just a little, then violently. Something was waking up beneath his skin. His chest expanded unnaturally, stretching the skin tight. His stomach started bulging upward. Then it grew. A mass, black-red, wet, pulsating like a heart. It pushed up through his throat, through the hole in his skull and out of his mouth, out of his eyes, stretching them until they tore. I clamped both hands over my mouth to keep from gagging. The mass kept growing, then began to shift. Bones formed inside of it, snapping into place. Skin stretched into the new shape. Hair sprouted. Then, standing over the man's corpse was a perfect copy of him. Same height, same face, same haircut, same everything. Except its eyes. His eyes were so still, so clean like a baby's eyes straight out of the womb. The copy wiped a smear of blood from his cheek with mechanical calm. It undressed the corpse, replacing its naked body with the blood-stained clothes of the dead man. Then it grabbed the dead man by the wrists, dragged him to the hole in the floorboards, and shoved him inside, right next to Maya, next to Darius, next to the others. It pressed the plank back in place, Then it turned, straightened its shirt, rolled its shoulders back into perfect posture, and walked out the barn like nothing happened. No rush, no nerves, just calm, smooth, practiced movement. I stayed hidden behind the trough long after its footsteps faded, shaking so hard my teeth clenched. The world wasn't what I thought it was anymore, and I knew without a doubt something is replacing people in my town. That's what caused me to post here. I need to know if it's just my town. If you can see this post, please let me know if my town is the only one. I'm scared the world will never be the same. I washed my face with cold water, letting it run longer than necessary. The hostel mirror was cheap and water-spotted, but it had always been sufficient. I looked up and froze. Black spots mottled my reflection, spreading like ink bleeding into water. My eyes were darker, sharper. The reflection spoke. Disappointed. 12 weeks earlier, I had arrived at the Institute to study physics. I'd chosen it because it was reliable. Unlike people, physics made sense. Professor Mahesh Mahara taught optical systems and reflective phenomena, and also a seminar called Science, Power, and Knowledge, examining how scientific objectivity is itself a political claim, how institutions determine what questions get asked. He spoke about caste and scientific institutions with the ease of someone who had lived inside the argument. He was perhaps in his late 30s, with a face that gave nothing away until he chose to let it. After the lecture, I asked about epistemology. How do we distinguish between valid critique and relativism? He looked at me, really looked, the kind of attention that makes you suddenly aware of being seen, and smiled. That's exactly the right question. He invited me to his optics seminar. I went and kept going. By October, I was spending more time in his lab than anywhere else. His office was on the 3rd floor. Big room, walls covered with photographs of Einstein and Feynman, alongside Tagore and Kafka. His custom desk had a periodic table, inlaid in different metals and woods. At the far corner stood a tall mirror in a matte black frame, nearly ceiling height. Difficult to maintain delusions when you're forced to look at yourself clearly, he used to say. I thought that was profound. In November, he asked me to assist with his research. Partial reflection and layered optical systems, technically complex, requiring careful calibration. I can't pay you yet. Grant funding is complicated, but co-authoring would be invaluable. I said yes immediately. I was hungry for real research, for being taken seriously by someone whose mind I admired. We spent hours adjusting lenses, running measurements. He explained theory with patience I'd never encountered. He asked my opinion. He listened, and during coffee breaks we discussed Ambedkar, Gramsci, and Lordy. You're one of the few students I can really talk to, he said once. I felt honored, chosen. I didn't yet understand that charm is not a personality trait. It's a strategy. The fest was announced in late January. I mentioned it to Professor Mehra casually one afternoon. Indian Ocean is playing this Friday. The silence made me look up. His expression had changed, not dramatically, just a tightening around the eyes, a flatness to his mouth. Cold. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Then he smiled. Of course, go. You deserve a break. The smile was warm, but I had seen the flicker underneath it. I left feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't fully understand. Friday evening the band was everything I'd hoped, but I couldn't settle into it. I kept thinking about that flicker. I left halfway through the performance, telling myself I was tired, telling myself it was my choice. I walked back to my hostel in the dark, washed my face, looked in the mirror, black spots, spreading the ink. disappointed. The reflection continued. You knew he needed you this week. The data collection was time sensitive. You chose amusement over commitment. Everything he's invested in you, his time, his patience, his willingness to mentor someone who should still be fumbling through coursework, you've repaid with selfishness. I just wanted to go to the college fest. You betrayed his trust. He will forgive you. He is generous. But this disappointment is yours to carry. I turned off the light and lay in the dark, trying to apply reason to what I'd experienced. Stress, overwork, hallucination. Next morning, I walked to the physics building. How was the concert? Professor Mehra asked, looking up with a smile. I left early, I said. I'm sorry. The data collection was time sensitive and Hey, he stood, came around the desk. You don't need to apologize. I told you to go. His voice was so kind, so reasonable. I just want you to know that I take this seriously. I don't want you to think I know exactly what you are. Brilliant, dedicated, one of the best students I've had in 15 years. He stepped closer. Come here. He hugged me, gentle at first, then tighter. When he stepped back, his hand stayed on my upper arm, thumb making a small circle against my sleeve. Then his hand moved to my face, cupped my cheek. I wanted to step back, but the mechanism that would allow me to move, to speak, to say no had been carefully dismantled over months, and I was only now discovering it was missing. He kissed me, violently, as if consent were already established through proximity, through intellectual intimacy that had somehow been transmuted into something else entirely. I stood frozen, my mind screaming no while my body did nothing. His hands moved, one at the back of my neck, one at my waist, and I caught my reflection in the tall mirror at the corner of the office. My reflection was responding. In the glass, my body leaned into him. My arms moved to his shoulders. My lips moved with what looked like eagerness, like desire. But my actual body was rigid. Every muscle locked in a paralysis I couldn't break. My actual arms hung at my sides. The reflection was performing what he wanted to see, the response that would confirm his narrative. That this was mutual, that I had wanted this, and everything he'd built over months was paying off exactly as planned. He pulled back slightly, searching my face, then looked past me at the mirror. What he saw there satisfied him completely. I opened my mouth, tried to form words. What came out was, I should go. Not like a refusal, not like anything that would make him stop. Are you okay? I have work to do. He smiled. Don't overthink this. What we have is rare. Don't let fear ruin it. At the exit, I glanced back. In the mirror, my reflection stood a moment longer, looked at him, smiled, satisfied, before turning to follow me out. Back in my hostel room, I turned the shower to scalding and stood under it fully dressed, peeled off my clothes as the water burned my skin, scrubbed until the skin was raw and red. But I couldn't scrub off what I was trying to clean. I sat in front of the mirror afterwards. The black spots had returned, darker now. Did you really think you could say no? After everything? You went to his office alone, stayed late, shared your vulnerabilities. You built intimacy and now you're surprised. You didn't say no. You didn't push him away. You stood there. You let it happen. Stop, I whispered. Then what were you doing? I screamed, a sound that tore from somewhere deep in my chest, that rattled the thin door. My roommate Alicia burst in, scanning for visible damage. I turned. The mirror behind me showed two worried faces. Normal, no black spots, no shadows. Just a 19-year-old girl with wet hair and skin rubbed raw. You've been working too hard, Alicia said, firm but kind. Come on, you need to eat, and tomorrow I am taking you to see Dr. Kapoor. Dr. Kapoor's office was quiet, plants in every corner, soft afternoon lights. Tell me what's been happening. I tried. The mirror, the black spots, the voice, Professor Mehra and what had happened in his office and the way my reflection had responded when I hadn't. But every time I got close to saying plainly what had happened, the words dissolved, as if something physical was blocking them. After 3 sessions, Dr. Kapoor gently suggested I take time away. Go home for 2 months. Let yourself rest. The university will be here when you get back. I took the leave, went home to Kolkata, slept, ate, and slowly, carefully started doing physics again. Not for anyone, not to prove anything, just for myself. Clean thinking that was still mine. Something returned. Not all at once, but it came back. A sense of my own mind as a distinct thing with edges. One morning I caught myself in the mirror and stopped. The black spots were fading. Not gone, but thinner. Receding like a stain being slowly drawn out of cloth. My reflection looked at me. I looked back. For the first time in weeks, we appeared to be in sync. 3 weeks in, a shape appeared behind me in the glass. Faint at first. A woman. I spun around. Empty room. She kept appearing, grew more distinct each time. A young woman, thin, dark hair and skin covered with black spots. I sat deliberately in front of the mirror one morning and waited. She appeared behind my left shoulder. I see you, I said quietly. She lifted her head, tried speaking but managed only one word. Help. I found her on the university website. Ria Menon. 2nd year, research assistant under Professor M. Mehra. Of course she was. I wrote her an email that night. I know this will sound strange. I just want you to know that someone who has been where you are exists and got out. You can reply or not. I'll be here. 6 days of silence, then a reply. How did you know? We spoke for weeks. Messages first, then calls. Her voice always slightly hushed, always listening for something behind it. Ria was still in it, still going to his office, still tangled in the guilt and obligation he'd spent months weaving around her like a noose. Every time I try to say he's manipulating me, she said, I hear myself saying I'm overreacting. I know, the words just stop, like something's in the way. She told me it had moved faster with her. He'd been less patient, more direct. There had been coercion, the kind where you say no and then you find yourself not saying no anymore, and afterward you can't fully explain what happened to your own refusal. I held the phone and said nothing, and let the rage sit in my chest like something burning. He has this mirror in his office, she said. This tall one, really old. I've always hated it, but it's the only mirror I look normal in anymore. Every other mirror, I see darkness. Spots like red spreading across my face, my skin. I went very still. Ria, I kept my voice even. Every other mirror is showing you the danger. His mirror is lying. What? The spots get worse after you see him, don't they? It wasn't a question. Long pause. Yes. And better when you don't? Yes. But in his mirror, you are perfect. A sharp intake of breath. The silence stretched. Oh my God, she breathed. It's a curated reflection, Ria. The one he wants to see. He owns the glass, but he doesn't own the light. I'm coming back. Ria met me outside the library. Her eyes tracked the periphery, her hands never quite still. You're real, she said. We didn't waste time. At 4:15, using Ria's keycard, we entered his office. The mirror stood in the corner, covered. We carried it down the stairwell in complete silence, rage burning inside my chest. The lecture hall was a sea of open notebooks and academic deference. Mehra was mid-sentence, lecturing on optical distortions, when the side door creaked open. He saw the mirror first. For a microsecond, his face changed. A flash of pure animal panic before the professor mask snapped back into place. "What are you doing?" We didn't answer. We set the mirror at the front of the room, angled it 45 degrees and let the room look. In the glass, the seminar was a masterpiece. The students looked like disciples. The faculty nodded in high-definition respect. And there at the focal point, Mehra stood bathed in a soft, curated glow. Beside him in the reflection, Ria was smiling, her hand resting tenderly on his arm. But the room was looking at the real Ria. Her hands were white-knuckled, her face a reflection of trauma, standing 3 feet away from him. The murmur started in the front and rippled back. It was the sound of a system realizing the data didn't match the observation. A student lowered her pen. The dean leaned forward. The objective reality Mehra had built was losing its signal-to-noise ratio. "I think we should." Mehra began, his voice tight. "You taught us that objectivity requires testing." I cut in with a calm voice. "We're testing the interference pattern." He looked at me with the flat arithmetic of a man calculating exits. He found none. The room had shifted its axis. I didn't just swing. I used the weight of the frame. The glass didn't just break. It fractured into a web of jagged trajectories, 1,000 tiny fragments of truth falling to the floor. Then the spots appeared, not on the glass but on him. In the harsh fluorescent light of the hall, the black spots appeared across his skin. It crawled up his wrists. It mottled his jaw. It stained the face of the man who had spent 15 years being brilliant. The room fell into a terrifying, holy silence. Phones rose, not to record a lecture, but to document a rot. Hundreds of lenses, actual, unbiased, focused on him, focused on his reality. He looked at his hands. He looked at the faculty who were now backing away, refusing to offer him the optics he needed to survive. He tried to speak, but the charm was gone. He was just a man without an instrument, standing in the wreckage of his own reflection. "This is," he stammered. "The truth," I completed. He wasn't gone. He wasn't even fired, but he was fixed, trapped in the new arrangement of reality. The story was no longer his to tell. Later I stood in front of the hostile mirror. No black spots, no voice. Plath wrote that the mirror swallows whatever it sees, immediately, without preconception. No distortion, no mercy, just the truth of the thing in front of it. I pressed my fingertips to the glass. It showed me a girl who had learned, the hard way, what it meant to be seen clearly. I am not silver. I am not his reflection. I am Ananya Deshmukh. And I am exact. I've been friends with this girl I'll call Sarah since I can remember. Her and I were raised together, our families being good friends since before either of us were born. She's older than me, but only for 2 months. And that's helped us stay together even in school. Currently, we are both 21. Sarah has always been a really funny and charming girl. Between the two, she's the more outgoing and social, always wearing bright colors. Meanwhile, I could be considered somewhat opposite to her, being more reserved and choosing darker clothing. Still, differences in style and personality never forbid me from loving to spend time with her, and I often found myself tagging along in whatever escapades she came up with. Close to a year ago, everything about Sarah changed completely. She called me one day, and the moment I picked up the phone I knew something was up. "Hey Sarah, what's up?" I asked. The voice that came out the other line was definitely Sarah. and she didn't waste a second before starting to question me. Hey, this might sound off, but you're OP, right? I laughed to myself, thinking she was building up to some sort of prank at first. Yes, this is OP. Okay, that's good, that's good. She went silent for a bit, then continued. Do you remember inviting me to hang out at the park last week? I recall you inviting me, yes. Me. I invited you, not the other way around? No. Is something wrong, Sarah? Sarah went silent for even longer. The way she was speaking prior lacked that energetic and contagious attitude I always expected from her, even in the most dire of situations. Sarah, are you there? Sorry. After a short pause, she began asking yet another question. Listen, do you remember... Do I remember what? I pushed. Do you remember Lucy being there? Lucy? What Lucy? I asked, now trying to figure out the punchline of a joke that wasn't there. Oh, no. Is this a prank? Come on, you know I'm not good at these. Lucy, don't tell me you don't know who Lucy is. You're joking, right? Please tell me you're all messing with me. With that, Sarah began sobbing on the phone. I couldn't make much of what she was saying mid-cry, but after a little bit of me trying to calm her down, she said she'd talk to me tomorrow and hung up. After that, I tried calling her back, but she'd reject my calls every time, and eventually messaged me begging for me to leave her alone until the next day. In the end, I relented, still worried. I could barely sleep, and by the next day, I was powering through my shift early in the morning with only 3 hours of rest. An hour before work was over, Sarah texted me asking if I was free to talk. I replied that I'd be free after work, and her only reply was, "Wait, you have a job?" Later that afternoon, I went to visit her. Both her parents worked late, so it was only her and I. We sat in the living room, at first mostly in an awkward silence. She felt distant and cagey, very much unlike the Sarah I knew. She was wearing black sweatpants and a gray hoodie, a far cry from her usual reds and blues. She hugged both her legs and looked at me carefully, her gaze seemingly analyzing my every feature, as if she was trying to find anything out of the ordinary. A bit uncomfortable, I broke the ice. So, Sarah, what was that yesterday? Did something happen? After a moment's hesitation, she answered, I think I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I tilted my head and squinted my eyes, thinking once again that this could be the build-up to some sort of elaborate prank. What do you mean? Yesterday I had a nap. When I woke up, things were different. My room, my clothes, this house, everything. Everything was wrong. She shifted into a more comfortable position, still hugging her leg, her eyes now aimed at the floor. Even you. You're healthy. Your hair is shorter and even your clothes are different too. It's like we switched wardrobes and it's driving me insane. The situation was so bizarre to me that I couldn't process what was happening. I couldn't really tell if she was trying to prank me or having some sort of mental health issue. So all I did was try to reassure her. Sarah, honey, it's alright. I'm here for you, okay? I don't know what's happening, but maybe we can talk to your parents and... Sarah interrupted me by raising her hand, motioning me to stop and speaking over me. No, that won't work. They'll think I'm crazy. I can see even if you think I'm crazy. No, OP. I'm not having some sort of crisis or going insane. I don't know, but I think I woke up in a different reality. Different reality? What do you mean? You know the timeline shifting? Multiverse theory? I looked at her, puzzled. At this, she shouted impulsively, Jesus Christ, OP. We watched so many videos on the topic last summer. During her little outburst, I was left speechless. The Sarah I knew hated swearing with a passion. and I recalled we did something completely different the summer prior. Dude, we went to a beach resort with both our families. You were flirting with this Jamaican boy half the time. Of course. She gave her next question a little more thought. Okay, what about the Mandela effect? Oh, I know that one. It's when you remember things differently to how they were, right? Yes, something like that. So imagine you wake up one day and not one or two things are different, but everything in your life is. As she said this, she tightened her grip on her thighs to the point I could see them sinking into the folds made from pressing into the pants fabric. And you're saying that happened to you? Yes, a lot of things are different. Some are kind of the same, but even those have some differences in this world. I get the idea, but I need you to understand that you sound completely insane. OP, I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me I look insane. At her request, I looked into her eyes. I recognized that look, the one Sarah gave me when she was in trouble, despair, fear, insecurity, all packaged into a singular look, something no one, save for me and her family, knew about. After that, I was able to believe her, if only a little. We began discussing the differences between my reality and hers. Things like the existence of Lucy, who apparently was the third best friend in our group, how another friend called Katie turned out to be our mortal enemy, or even darker stuff, like how Mr. Lanster, a well-liked teacher back in high school, was arrested for dating one of his students. Sarah asked me to explain what happened in this timeline, for her to know and try blending in. As the weeks passed, I kept hanging out with Sarah. Our time together felt both familiar and new. Her sudden change in tastes aligned with mine a lot more, so I felt a little guilty about the fact I was enjoying my new relationship with her more than the previous one. But then, things took a turn for the worse. She began getting sick often, and the more I saw her, the more her face was filled with dread and despair as an unknown disease took over her body. My routine changed to include daily visits to the hospital. As her health deteriorated, the amount of time I was allowed to see her was reduced as well. Last week was the last time I saw Sarah. She looked so frail I worried she'd pass away any second, but the poor girl was still able to have a conversation just fine. We had been talking for a bit. The time for me to leave was near. I have been cursed, she said all of a sudden, changing topics. What? I asked, taken aback by the sudden declaration. I found out the truth. I've been cursed to die here, in a reality that isn't my own. I never fully believed Sarah's story, but a part of me wanted to believe it was true. Gently I began asking questions of my own. How did you come to that conclusion? Yesterday, an old man came to visit. He had a kind look, and I think he was pitying me. An old man? One you didn't know? Yeah, he told me he knew about my situation, offered to help me, said I was cursed by someone back in my original reality, that this one can't sustain my form. As she told me this, she looked down at the white bed sheets covering her lower body. For some reason, she refused to meet my gaze. That's suspicious. Have you told other people about what happened? Only you. So it's weird, right? How did he offer to help? He said he could undo the curse, send me back before I die, but it has a cost I'm not sure I want to pay. A cost? What cost? I'll tell you later. I need to process things first. Something about what she said bothered me, but I didn't want to pressure her to speak. I figured that maybe she was having some sort of delusion, so after saying goodbye, I went home. Today I woke up in a room that's not my own. It's not where I'm supposed to be. I look the same, but my clothes are different. My room looks different. The house I live in should be the same, but the wallpaper is the wrong color, and there are pictures on the wall I don't remember taking. The living room has different couches. My email and usernames are different. I think I know what happened, and I don't belong here. I am not me. Sorry, because what I'm about to tell you will sound like the kind of BS people make up when they want strangers online to pay attention. But made-up stories don't park 2 black SUVs outside your house every night for 2 weeks, and pretend not to watch your windows. Believe me, don't believe me. That's not really why I'm writing this. Just know the road near my old house is still blocked. They say it's because of a gas leak. There is no gas line there. We had electric everything because Dina was scared of open flames. She said indoor fire felt primitive and wrong, and I thought she was just being dramatic. That's funny now, in a sick way. Dina and I had been married for 10.5 months. We were stupid in love. Embarrassing love. The kind where one of us would leave to buy something and the other would already be texting before they reached the store. We fought, too. Badly. Over nothing. Over dishes, over my work at the Research Institute, over her saying I wasn't really listening, over me saying she always sounded like she was translating normal human emotions from a manual. That one made her cry. I apologized for it for 2 days. I didn't know then how close I was. The night it happened, I came home late. I was shaking from coffee and hunger, and whatever you call it when your whole life has just cracked open. I had done it. Not the final machine, obviously, but the math. The ugly part. The part everyone said was impossible. Star Drive. Faster than light. Whatever name you want. I don't know what they'll call it when they finally show you. If they ever do. I had it in my bag. Dina had dinner ready. That should have scared me right away because Dina did not cook when she was happy. She cooked when she was trying not to fall apart. There were candles on the table, cheap ones. One had burned down into this sad little blob. Pasta, garlic, wine. She was wearing my shirt, bare legs, hair still wet from the shower. God, she was beautiful. That's the thing I hate most. Not that she lied. Not that I was just a chore, but I can still see her and want her. She said, "You're late." I said, "You're scary." She laughed, but not right. A little too late. You know how you learn someone? Not the big stuff, the tiny stuff. How they breathe when they're mad. How they say fine when it's absolutely not fine. How they kiss you when they want sex versus when they want forgiveness. That laugh was wrong. But I wanted to ignore it. I wanted dinner, and her, and that stupid little moment where I got to tell my wife I had done something impossible. So I ignored it. She came over and kissed me before I even put my bag down. Hard kiss. Teeth, wine, salt. Like she was mad at my mouth. Then there was a bitter taste. I said, "What the hell is that?" Or I tried to. My tongue got thick, my fingers went numb. The bag slid off my shoulder and hit the floor. Dina caught me. Caught me like I weighed nothing. That was another thing she forgot to hide. She lowered me down onto the kitchen tile, gentle, careful, like I was drunk and she was embarrassed of me. I couldn't move. Not couldn't move like panic. Couldn't move like my body had been unplugged. I could breathe, barely. I could see, I could hear, I could feel the cold tile under my cheek. She sat on the floor and pulled my head into her lap. Then she wiped spit from my chin with her thumb. That almost broke me. I know that sounds pathetic, but when someone poisons you and still wipes your mouth because she can't stand seeing you like that, your brain doesn't know where to put it. She was crying by then. Quietly. Not movie crying. Ugly crying. Nose running, shoulders shaking, trying not to make noise, which was very Dina, because even then she didn't want to make it about her. Then she explained, just enough. Not everything. People in stories explain too much. Real people don't. Real people choke on half of it, and repeat themselves. She wasn't from here, not from Earth. She had been sent because of me, not because I was special, because I might become special. Her people had ways of knowing which humans were likely to open certain doors. My name came up. She was supposed to get close, slow me down, push me left when I should have gone right. And she did, for a while. The job I didn't take, the paper I gave up on. The nights she pulled me back to bed when I was close to something. The trip she begged me to take right before a deadline. The fights. Jesus, the fights. They had told her to kill me months earlier. She didn't betray them. She stalled. That was all her love was worth in the end. She said humans couldn't be allowed out there. We liked playing with fire too much. Not yet. Maybe not ever. We were too fast, too angry, too good at turning pain into tools. She said that part like she hated us. Then she touched my face like maybe she was hoping love had finally worn off. It should have been simple. Kill the husband, take the math, get on the ship. Hero of whatever hell she came from. Her people were coming for her before dawn. I would be dead. My lab would burn in a way that looked like my fault. Clean. The word made me want to laugh, but my mouth didn't work. Clean. My wife sat there holding me like she used to after panic attacks, except this time she was the reason I couldn't move. You're probably thinking I was a naive idiot, some dead-eyed scientist who knew math but not his own wife, too busy chasing equations to notice what was sleeping next to him. I wasn't. I actually had known for months. Not known like I had a photo of her with antenna or whatever stupid thing you're imagining. I knew the way husbands know things, and then hate themselves for knowing. She was wrong in small places. The first real crack was a cut on her hand that closed while I was still reaching for a towel. She laughed it off and said I'd imagined how bad it was. The second was finding her barefoot in the yard at 3 a.m, whispering into the dark while every insect in the grass had gone silent. There were other things too. Small things. Things you can explain once, maybe twice, until explaining them starts to feel stupider than the truth. Eventually I called an old friend of my dad's. I didn't want to. I sat with the phone in my hand for almost an hour, because making that call meant admitting that the thing in my bed was not my wife in any normal sense. He didn't sound shocked. That scared me more than anything. He asked me 3 questions, very calmly, and by the third one I understood he already knew what she was. Then he said, "Do not confront her. Do not try to leave. If she thinks you know, you won't survive the night." That was when it landed properly. Dina wasn't a mystery anymore. She was a placement. She was there for me, for the work, and sooner or later, she was going to finish what she had been sent to do, which is exactly what happened. Then I met the others. Men and women with normal clothes and dead faces, asking questions nobody should know to ask. Not just about Dina, about our sex, our fights, her blood, her sleep, the words she used when she was angry, whether she ever got sick, whether animals acted strange around her, whether lights flickered when she touched them, whether I had ever woken up and found her watching me. Nobody looked shocked enough. That's when I learned they had been chasing this for years. Not aliens exactly. Traces, shadows, bad transmissions, burned bodies, missing scientists, houses cleaned too well, bodies found with organs that did not fail in any way human medicine understood. Nothing whole, nothing useful. They didn't need proof aliens existed. They needed one of them alive. But even that wasn't the real prize. The real prize was what came to pick them up. A ship. A working one. Not another fried transmitter. Not a melted implant. Not some dead thing on a table with all the useful parts burned out. A ship meant propulsion, shielding, power. Navigation, alloys, control systems, the actual machinery of how they move through space. Not theory, not guesses. Hardware. So we made me bait. The breakthrough was real, but the timing was fake. The notebook was bait. The public lecture next week was bait. The little hints I dropped at work were bait. The house was the trap. The busted plumbing? Trap. The new water heater Dina hated because it made the closet smell like metal? Trap. The landscaping crew that tore up our backyard for 3 days while Dina complained they were killing her lavender? Trap. Under our house was enough human desperation to pull something impossible out of the sky, but only if she called them close. Only if she didn't just run. Only if she loved me enough to say goodbye. Do you get how disgusting that is? I used the thing I was angriest about. I used us. At some point she looked down and saw my face. Not my fear, not my pain, my guilt. Marriage is a curse. You can't hide in your own face. She stopped touching my hair. She whispered, no. That was all. Just no. Then, how long? I couldn't answer. She looked at the bag on the floor, the notebook, the candles, the windows, all of it. And she understood. I saw my wife die right there, without anyone shooting her. They didn't. Before anything fell from the sky, whatever she thought we had, whatever little piece of us she believed was clean, it broke. Our marriage was a big total sham. A trap with wedding photos on the wall and her hair in my shower drain. She was using me. I was using her. We both had our noble excuses, but when she put her hand on my face, it still felt like home. The lights went out. Not like a power outage, like the dark had weight. The windows filled with light. The whole house made this deep animal sound. Metal screamed inside the walls. My teeth hurt. Blood ran out of my nose onto the tile. Dina crawled off me and tried to stand. She was still trying to reach the back door when the sky tore open. I didn't see a ship, not clearly. I saw shapes where the stars should be. I saw the yard bending upward like it wanted to leave. I saw Dina in the white light, one hand on the door frame looking back at me. She could have killed me then. Then the world punched itself inside out. I woke up in a hospital with tubes in me and 2 government men pretending to be doctors. They got it. That's what they told me. Intact enough. I didn't care, really. They didn't tell me about Dina at first. I had to ask 3 times before one of them finally looked at the other and said, she got out. I laughed because I thought he meant she had escaped the room. Then he said she had shed the human layer, like it was clothing, like my wife was something she could peel off and leave on the floor. The other one said, you don't want to see what was underneath. I asked anyway. They told me what she looked like underneath. I could hear the disgust in their voices. Sorry you had to live with that, one said. Something soft and deep and awful twisted inside my chest. My name is Ryan. I was a 30-something-year-old failure of a man who was hardly holding himself together a couple of years before I am writing this. I lived in a mess, the crappy little apartment with a bedroom, what you could call a living room, and a bathroom the size of an airplane one I inhabited didn't have a clear floor in years. I barely worked enough to live. I would regularly spend my free time drunk, and I hadn't eaten a vegetable in about 3 years. Which made the next part especially weird. One morning I woke up and took my weekly crap and saw something strange in my toilet. Corn. I thought it was strange because, as previously listed, I hadn't eaten a vegetable in years, let alone corn. I chalked it up as something I did while drunk. Maybe I just craved corn for some reason and decided to get some instead of going after my typical junk food. I moved on from that event, but I kept having corn in my stool. The next week there was corn in my stool, then a few days later, corn again. It eventually got to a point where every couple of days I was having corn in my stool and I was completely lost as to where it was coming from. After 2 months of constant corn, I eventually noticed something even stranger. I could see the floor of my room for the first time since I had moved in years ago. I must have started cleaning my room when I was drunk. There was still trash everywhere, but far less than there used to be. I guess I didn't question any of it because it wasn't a bad thing. I actually liked not having to trudge my way through heaps of fast food wrappers and boxes of old junk food, and I wasn't going to complain if drunk me wanted to renovate a little bit. But after that, it got weirder. I would wake up after I went to sleep and my head wouldn't be burning from a hangover. I would notice myself having more bowel movements than I used to. My clothes were cleaned and folded despite the fact that would have taken hours for drunk me to do. My room was mopped for God's sake, and yet I still didn't question it at that point despite the fact I didn't own a mop, let alone have any intentions of borrowing one. Despite all of that, I still didn't question it until I came home one day and saw that my bed was made. I couldn't have done it because I never made my bed. Drunk me couldn't have done it because he wasn't there, which only meant that somebody else was doing it. My first thought wasn't that somebody broke in, but rather maybe my landlord was doing it, or maybe a concerned neighbor. But then I remembered somebody. I had an old friend from high school message me online about a month before all of this happened. He wanted to say hi to me and catch up. I wasn't exactly willing to, but he was probably the best man I ever knew, and I would feel bad leaving him on red. He was one of the few people who ever spoke to me and tried to befriend me. I kept to myself mostly, but he'd still try to talk to me despite my lack of interesting conversation. I told him that if he wanted to hang out, he could come over in front of my apartment and we could talk for a bit. But he actually took it a step further and came inside and talked to my landlord who happened to be there at the time. Of course, he told him where my apartment was because he had no sense of people's safety, and the thought that this person might be coming in to murder me or something. So needless to say, my old high school friend knocked on my front door and saw my horrid apartment. "Oh," he said to me, taken aback from the sight and smell of my living conditions. How have you been, man?" He managed to stammer through after coming to terms with his shock. "I am fine," I replied in embarrassment and shame. "Do you want to go outside?" We ended up not going back into my apartment. Instead, we went to the front of the complex and talked for a while. He asked me what I've been up to which I replied with a simple, "Not much." He seemed to accept that answer without prying much further. I asked him how he had been, and his life had been great, talking about how he had just gotten married, his job, his house, his lifestyle that was far better than mine. I don't want to say I was seething with jealousy, but I was definitely made more aware about how terrible my life was compared to his and probably everyone else's. I always knew that my life was awful and that I needed to change, but I just never found the motivation to start. Once the garbage piled, I just let it continue to pile because it had been too difficult to clean up. He eventually told me straight up, "Dude, you live in a mess." I was taken aback by the blatant statement, but he continued, "You can't keep living like that. It's going to kill you." I don't remember what I said, but I think I made a remark about how it's easier said than done, and some other stuff, but despite the fact I was probably an asshole about it, he simply offered me some help. "Look, man, if you ever need it, I can come help you clean your apartment, and maybe the rest of your life. Just call me and I'll be happy to help." I was shocked at this point. I have to go now, but if you need help, please don't hesitate to ask. I never did call him back, but since that has been happening, I figured maybe I should. Before I called him, I had to even practice what to say. I realized how ridiculous it sounded to ask a friend if he was breaking into my apartment every day to slowly clean up my apartment, Well, I was either drunk, sleeping, or at work, but I figured my landlord would be the type of guy to give him a spare key or something to help him get in. And he also knew I didn't have anything worth robbing. I finally called him and just asked him if he'd like to come by my apartment someday, to which he said he'd come by, but that it would be in a couple of months. I decided to set up some cameras in my house to see if I could catch anyone breaking in when I went to bed. I realized how ridiculous the idea that it could be my friend doing it was, and decided to see if maybe there was a squatter in my apartment, or something who was taking care of me for some reason. When I checked the camera the next day, I was terrified. This long, spindly creature came out of a shadow in the corner. It moved around the ceilings like a spider, and walked across the floor sideways like a crab. It looked emaciated, with what looked like a 5-foot-tall torso with ribs poking out at the very top. They looked like they could rip through at any second. It had a narrow head. That was a dome, with dents where the eyes should be, but simply with smooth skin over them. It reminded me of that squid at the bottom of the ocean with 20-foot-long arms. The way they both weren't meant to be seen by the human eye, but were both discovered in darkness. The disproportionately long arms, of which I'm sure there were at least 8, but more seemed to appear and disappear at random. Started scooping up trash, taking it outside and then coming back in. It did that for a couple of hours before coming back inside with a container of something and a large glass of what I assume was water making its way to where I was drunkenly sleeping. It slowly reached an arm out to me, which bent at strange angles I barely understood how it could possibly do without snapping, and pulled the covers over my body, leaving only my head exposed. It proceeded to pour the water down my throat and fed me several different types of food from the container, including strawberries, spinach, cucumber, and of course corn, before it went back to a corner in my room where it disappeared. Now I know what you're thinking. I should have packed my bags then and there and never looked back. I know logically that was the correct choice, but I want you to look at it from my point of view. I was living a life that was the pinnacle of misery. I went to bed in a small apartment with nobody who cared for me, surrounded by filth, to a completely clean apartment with a decent diet. At this point, I had started taking care of myself too. I was bathing more regularly, not drinking as much, and even started cleaning up messes myself too. This was a good thing, and was truly improving my life, even if I didn't completely understand it. The creature even managed to get me a job interview for a place that paid way more. I have no idea how it sent the email, but it was further proof to me that it wanted to improve my life. My life was on the up and up. I got the job the creature landed me an interview for. I was more social. I was happier and healthier. I even started talking to a girl. If you were truly where I was during this time period, you would have been happy about all of this too. Despite the obvious strangeness of it all, it had become such a state for normalcy for me that at some point I sort of forgot about its existence. I stopped checking the cameras after a while because I knew what I would have seen, and honestly, I didn't care how my life was being improved. I was just happy to not be miserable for a change. At this point, I had completely forgotten about my friend coming over. When I heard a knock at my door, I was completely taken off guard by the sight of my old friend, who had a cleaning caddy with multiple sponges, 4 different types of cleaning spray for different surfaces, 2 cleaning brushes, 2 cans of Febreze, and a few other items. He was in shock at the sight of my apartment, which was completely spotless at this point, and almost dropped the caddy full of supplies before catching himself. We ended up talking for hours. Among the many things we talked about, I told him about my new job, the girl I had been seeing, and my complete turnaround. In turn, he told me about his wife and what he did for work. He told me he moved around a lot for work and happened to be staying in the city where I live last time I saw him, and happened to see me online and figured he'd pop in to see how I was doing at the time. He explained to me that when he saw my living conditions, he knew he couldn't just leave an old friend like that. When we finally finished talking, we hadn't realized how late it was. He told me he practically lived across the state, and that it would be at least a 5-hour drive. I invited him to stay the night instead, to which he obliged and said he simply needed to call his wife to tell her he'd be back the next day, and would leave first thing in the morning. When he returned, I offered him my bed, to which he refused. I insisted that he should take the bed, and I would sleep on the old futon that I'm pretty sure came with the place. After I insisted I'd be a terrible guest if I didn't allow him to sleep in a comfortable bed, he finally relented. When I woke up the next morning to my good friend gone, I didn't question it. When he didn't answer my text saying I enjoyed having him over, I figured he was a busy man and probably didn't have time to respond. When the police came to my door, I was more concerned. "Ryan Miller?" the officer asked, with a mixture of concern and accusation in his voice. "Yes," I responded nervously. "That's me." The man gave the inside of my apartment a look. "May I come in?" he asked. "You are not in trouble. We just need to speak with you." After I let the officer in, he explained everything. My friend had gone missing after he spent the night at my house. They said they knew I had nothing to do with his disappearance since they found his car hours away from my location, but still wanted to know if I knew anything about it since I was the last person to see him. I asked the officer what happened, to which he responded, "We found his car parked on the side of the road about 3 hours away from here, but he wasn't inside of it. After his wife reported him missing, we figured maybe you knew something about why he disappeared, since you were the last person to see him." He continued, "Did he complain about anything? Did he bring up being unhappy about work or something like that?" I thought about it for a hard minute during the hours we spent talking. He never seemed upset with his life. He had annoyances here and there, sure, but it's not like he suspected his wife of cheating on him or he thought his job was a dead end. He had the same thoughts most people have about life. It was annoying, but at the end of the day, we're glad we're here. "No, nothing," I finally said. He didn't have any complaints that would have warranted him just disappearing. After a while, the officer left and I remained, worried and confused. It took me 3 whole hours of worrying about what happened to my friend before I realized the cameras were still recording. I brought the footage back up from the night prior and watched the entire thing until I saw the creature pop out from the shadows. Except it ignored me and headed straight for the bedroom. It moved too quickly for a creature of such proportions and fragility. When it made it to the bedroom, it simply stared, except it looked almost hungry. There was a strange saliva that seemed to come out of what I can only assume is its mouth, and it simply stared there for hours until my friend, as promised, left first thing in the morning. I watched the creature lunge onto the shadows right before my friend's alarm went off, and I watched as my friend snuck by me out of the door to try not to wake me up. I watched in horror as the creature left outside of the window, which was on the same side of the building as my friend's car was parked. I don't know if the creature killed my friend or ate him or what, but the moment I saw that, I realized it was not safe to live there anymore. I realize now I should have known that the moment I saw a demon in my living room picking up trash, but I figured I made the choice right in time. I didn't just leave the apartment complex. I moved states. I live on the opposite side of the country. I didn't even fully pack all of my stuff before I left. I took what I picked, fit into one briefcase that was either somewhat valuable or would be annoying to replace, and left as fast as I could. I never gave the police that information because I knew it would be insane and nobody would believe me, so I simply got as far away from that thing as possible. Now it's years later. I found a job where I'm at right now. I live in an even nicer apartment too. The girl I was talking to didn't seem to understand what I was doing, which was also extremely difficult to explain, so we naturally stopped seeing each other. Other than that, my life's great. I kept some of the good habits too. I clean up after my messes. I stopped drinking. I make sure no garbage ends up on my floors. I eat better. I even started going for daily walks to help me be healthier. All was going great, except for one day, where I had slept in and was going to be late for work. I rushed out the door as fast as I could, cutting as many corners in my daily routine as possible, which of course meant I couldn't have made my bed. But when I came home that day, exhausted after a long day of work, I saw something that made my heart drop to my stomach. My bed was made. It started with small things. Electronics would break a lot when he was around. I had to get my laptop fixed twice. My fridge went out once and I had to scramble to drive all the food to my parents' house, so it didn't go bad while I was getting it fixed. Arjun helped. My house's circuit breaker tripped one time too when he went to plug something in. I tested the same plug later when he was gone and it didn't trip that time. Arjun has always had really good hearing. Like, really good. I can't count the number of times he's heard me mumble something through a wall. I've tested it. I'll speak so quietly that even I can barely hear it, and he'll have caught it word for word from outside the closed door. A few times I caught his reflection in the mirror, and I could swear it was slightly out of sync, moving a little too slow or making the wrong expressions. The smile stretched too wide, or eyebrows furrowed when Arjun's clearly weren't. In the same vein, every now and then I'd see him glaring at me out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked at him directly, all I saw was the shaggy mess of black hair on the back of his head. It was easy enough to dismiss all this at the time. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It never happened with anyone else, just him. But I dismissed it. Until last week. I had driven over to his house, something I don't do often since we usually meet outside or at mine. It was supposed to be a quick stop by to give back some work papers. He'd forgotten at mine on Friday evening, so I didn't call ahead. As I approached the distinctive red front door that stood in contrast to the dull colors of the rest of the street, something felt different. I looked around. My surroundings were the same as always. Pristine, white house exterior, broken planters, and 3 slightly grimy steps leading up to the entrance. As I reached for the knocker, there was a tug at the back of my mind, like realizing you've forgotten something but you can't remember what it was. No one answered the first knock, or the second. To my surprise, when I tried the handle, the door gave way. My chest began to knot as I stared wide-eyed at the opening. Arjun wouldn't just leave it unlocked. Had there been a break-in, was he okay? I inhaled shakily a few times, trying to break my heart rate down. I was getting ahead of myself. Maybe he'd just forgotten to lock it. Happens to the best of us. I let myself in, pushing the door further inward. As I stepped over the threshold, immediately I could feel my panic rising again. Arjun's house is pretty open plan, so from the living room, I was able to see most of the area downstairs. I called out for him. The house seemed empty. If Arjun was home, I'd have expected to hear movement, something cooking on the stove or at least a TV playing. It was silent. I checked all the rooms upstairs, but they seemed completely untouched. It would be uncharacteristic for a break-in, and if Arjun had up and left, which I was now considering as a possibility, wouldn't he take some of his things? All his clothes were still hanging in the large built-in closet next to the rucksack he always takes when we go backpacking. When I came back downstairs, I realized there was still one room I'd forgotten to check in my hurried sweep of the house. The kitchen. I quickly walked past the living room and rounded the corner. The kitchen is separate from the other room downstairs. You can't see into it from the living room, which is why I missed it initially. The door is made of stained wood with a black, round doorknob. It was closed. I listened, straining my ears to catch the slightest hint of sound coming from behind the door. Nothing. Now the rising panic was accompanied by a twisting feeling in my gut. I wanted to leave, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It was just a door, polished but old, with the wood splitting slightly in some places. More importantly, I still didn't know what had happened to Arjun. And now his phone was going straight to voicemail. This was the only place in the house I hadn't looked. Just as I plucked up the courage to reach out and grab the knob, I heard a noise from inside. It sounded like someone throwing up. No, it sounded like a cat coughing up a hairball. I held the black metal tight in my hand and twisted. The door swung open steadily, inviting me in. I'd sort of forgotten that Arjun's house had a basement. I'd never been down there, and the door always stayed closed and locked, so it was easy to let it fade into the wall. Maybe imagine it as some sort of food pantry instead of what it really was. A cold, concrete, windowless expanse hidden beneath our feet. I don't like basements. Yellow-orange light spilled out from the open basement door, illuminating the kitchen in a dingy fall sunset glow. Looking around, I realized why it seemed to be the only light source in the room. All the blinds were shut. I didn't even realize his kitchen had blinds. Arjun always leaves them open. I almost jumped out of my skin, heart thundering as the horrific, hacking, puking sound echoed from the basement. Louder now. The noise was wet and visceral. It grated against my eardrums, sending chills down my spine. I shivered. Whatever was in the basement retched again. This time the noise was accompanied by wet thudding, like it was puking up huge chunks of something. A moment of silence, and then it spoke. It was a harsh, raspy voice, like the thing was struggling to take in air, and I could barely make out the words through its wheezing. The voice was so inhuman, so alien to my ears, and yet I don't know what compelled me to walk forward. My memories of this part are hazy, but the best way I can describe it is like I was being tugged forward by an invisible string, embedded deep within my chest. I stood in the basement doorway for a while, eyes following the narrow, wooden steps all the way down. They were walled off on both sides. They ended in concrete. I heard it clearer this time. It was rasping. Screw them. I hope, it wheezed. I hope they burn. The thing coughed, wet and loud, and I flinched. I still find it odd how even through the absolute, mind-numbing terror I was experiencing, I still felt a sense of morbid curiosity in that moment. What exactly was down there? The mere existence of this creature in the basement was making me reevaluate everything I thought I knew about, well, everything. It could talk. It even spoke like it felt emotions. It was angry at someone, and it sounded ill, very ill. The sounds of the creature struggling, its labored breath and lung-rending coughs, its quiet groans of pain that reverberated off the claustrophobic walls of the basement. They tugged at something tender, deep inside me. I wanted to help. I cast the thought out of my mind immediately. It sounded insane even to myself. What if that thing was hostile? Who knows what it would be capable of even in its current state? Maybe all of this was a ruse anyway. Some kind of trap that targeted my empathy. The best course of action was just to leave, obviously. I didn't even have the slightest clue what that thing was. I still don't. I began to weigh my exit options. If I made a break for it, would I be able to outrun whatever was down there? I barely had time to mull it over before something at the bottom of the stairs drew my attention. A long, clawed hand, bruised black and green like decay, dripping with a clear, snot-like, liquidy gel that glistened in the lamplight. It scraped at the ground, nails digging into the grooves of the cement. I froze. God, I felt sick. My stomach churned horribly as I tried to process the gruesome sight I was confronted with. I felt like a snake was thrashing around my insides. It's a miracle how I managed not to puke right there and then. Instead, I remained deadly silent. I didn't even dare to breathe as I stood paralyzed in the doorway. My mind was blank and my vision began to swim. Whether from pure terror or lack of oxygen, I couldn't tell. I heard a scrape from below paired with a grunt as more of the arm appeared, coated in that slippery goo that oozed onto the surrounding concrete, staining it to dark gray. My heart dropped as I finally realized what it was doing. It was trying to pull itself forward. I ran. I've never run so fast in my life. It's been a week since then. Arjun texted me an hour after I left. It was regular, innocuous stuff at first. "Hey, what's up? I think I left some papers at your place. Yo, dude, are you asleep? You always text back so fast." I think that just made the whole thing so much worse. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I stopped checking my messages after a while. He started calling me again and again and again. I blocked his number. He even came by my house a few times. I never answered. I kept my curtains shut after the first time. All of them. After everything I saw in that house, in that dingy hellhole of a basement, there's just one thing I can't get out of my head. It's the thing that's kept me awake every night since that day, tossing and turning in the sheets. It was Arjun's voice. When the creature spoke in that raspy, hellish, inhuman voice, underneath it all I heard Arjun. Same tone, same cadence, same voice. I can't explain it. I just know it was him. I'm struggling to accept that what I witnessed down there is real. I can't. How am I supposed to accept that my friend, my best friend, is a monster? I'll start by saying I'm not a superstitious person. I spent 11 years staring at spreadsheets in a Chicago office on the 14th floor. Numbers, deadlines, the same coffee machine that always burned the bottom of the pot. I was good at my job. I was miserable at my life. So I turned 34 and my doctor told me my blood pressure was that of a 60-year-old. I did something my coworkers thought was insane. I quit. I sold my apartment. I bought 40 acres in a Harlan County, Kentucky, and I moved into a farmhouse that smelled like old wood and something I couldn't name. I wanted soil. I wanted silence. I wanted to grow something with my hands for once instead of just moving numbers around. For the first 2 weeks, it was everything I imagined. Quiet mornings, hard work, falling asleep before 10 p.m. I felt like a different person. Then I found the marks. They were carved into the ground at the edge of the east field. Not scratched, carved. Deep and deliberate, like someone had taken their time. Symbols I didn't recognize arranged in a pattern that almost looked like it meant something. I took pictures and posted them on a local Facebook group, asking if anyone knew what they were. One woman said kids probably did it. One man said it was probably an old property marker. Nobody seemed concerned. I told myself they were right and went back to work. 3 days later, the corn in that field was already 6 inches tall. I'd planted it less than 2 weeks before. I'm not an experienced farmer, but I did my research. I knew what the growth rate was supposed to look like. This wasn't it. I walked the rows every morning, and every morning it was taller than it should have been. I called the guy I bought the property from and asked if the soil had been treated with anything. He laughed and said that field hadn't grown anything in 15 years. I started hearing it in the 3rd week. Not a sound, exactly. More like the absence of sound moving. Like something was walking through the field at night, and the crickets going quiet wherever it passed. I'd sit on the porch and watch the silence move between the rows, a line of nothing cutting through the noise. I bought a trail camera and set it up facing the east field. The next morning I checked the footage. 8 hours of recording. The timestamp was correct, but the footage from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. was just white. Not corrupted, not dark. White. Like something had been directly in front of the lens producing light, but there was nothing there when I checked in the morning. I showed my neighbor Earl. He's 67, been farming in Harlan his whole life. He looked at the footage for a long time without saying anything. Then he handed my phone back and told me to plant something else in that field. I asked him why. He said some ground remembers things. I didn't know what that meant, and he didn't explain further. On a Tuesday morning in the 4th week, I walked out to the field and found my dog at the edge of it. She wasn't moving. I found the others throughout the day. 3 rabbits, 2 birds, a deer, all of them arranged in a perfect circle around a single point near the center of the field. Not scattered, not random. Placed. Every animal facing outward from the center, like they were guarding something, or presenting it. I called the county animal control. They came out, looked around, took some notes, and told me it was probably coyotes. I didn't argue, but I stood there after they left and looked at that circle for a long time. Coyotes don't make circles. Coyotes don't arrange things. That night, I didn't sleep. I went to the center of the circle the next morning with a shovel. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was hoping to find nothing and finally convince myself that I'd made a mistake moving here, and that everything had a rational explanation, and I could go back to being a boring accountant who thought the most terrifying thing in the world was a quarterly audit. I dug for maybe 20 minutes before the shovel hit something that wasn't soil. I cleared the dirt away with my hands. It was a woman. She was wrapped in leaves from the corn, the same corn that had grown too fast in the wrong soil in the field that hadn't produced anything in 15 years. The leaves were woven around her like someone had taken time with it, like it meant something. She looked like she was sleeping except for the fact that she was clearly gone. Her skin was the color of the soil. Her hands were folded across her chest, and she was smiling. Not the slack expression of someone who died peacefully. A smile, deliberate, like whatever she saw last was something she had been waiting a long time to see. She was wearing a jacket with a Target tag still on the sleeve. The police came. They taped off the field. They asked me questions for hours and then asked me to stay in the county while they investigated. That was 6 days ago. They haven't told me who she is. They haven't told me how long she was down there. What they don't know, because I didn't tell them, is that last night I went through my trail camera footage again. All of it, from the beginning. In the very first recording, the night after I planted the east field, before the marks, before everything, there is a moment at 3 a.m. where the camera shifts slightly. Just a degree, like something bumped it gently, and in the corner of the frame, just barely visible is a hand, pressed flat against the soil. From underneath, I'm not going back to that field. I don't think it matters. This morning I found marks carved into the wood of my porch steps. I recognized them this time. They're the same ones I found in the east field. They weren't there yesterday. Update. Several people have asked me about the symbols. I've been trying to upload the photos, but my phone keeps freezing every time I open that specific folder. I'll keep trying. Also, Earl won't answer my calls anymore. Her hair, her skin, her eyes, they were all perfect. Her teeth were set a little too deeply in her gums, a few degrees off from their normal angle. Her hair flowed in a clumsy motion, as if it was trying to escape casually. Her eyes... something was wrong with her eyes. Were they the wrong color? No. They were broken. Some people say the eyes are the windows into the soul. The soul that I was staring at through these windows was shattered. The only thing that remained were the fragments of who she once was. Where is he? I asked, pulling her from her chair. Who? My darling Richard? Oh, he won't be back until later, she said as she stared emptily at the picture frame sitting across from her. She was kept in the most secluded and darkest room in the apartment. The apartment reeked of chemicals and secrets. The lights were dim and the windows were all sealed off. I knew that I was not meant to see this place. I knew that Richard kept this place quiet, like that deep part in the back of your head. What was this all for? I thought to myself. The room was lit by a singular light. It stood over the table which held the picture frame, the one Molly couldn't take her eyes off of. I need you to come with me, I commanded her. Her broken eyes remained fixed on the picture in front of her. Come on, Molly, we have to leave, I pleaded, pulling her as she resisted. No, stop it. I can't make my little Ricky angry, she said with a strong defiance. Please just leave with me, I begged. She sat back down, her eyes still glued to that picture frame. I turned and looked at what had captured her attention. The room was filthy, but that table and frame were pristine. I approached it, seeing two figures embracing each other. I began to realize that it was not Molly and Richard in the picture. It was Richard and his ex, Chloe. Oh my God, I whispered under my breath. Bile floated up my throat as thoughts ran through my head. I approached Molly with a new sense of fragility. Her eyes remained unblinking. Her face seemed pristine from a distance, but slowly I could start to see scars. Hundreds of them on her face. Small and thin, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. They flowed down her jaw and sculpted her forehead. They dug deep caverns into her cheeks, making dimples I hadn't remembered her having the first time I had met her. The thickest line of them all was on her hairline. It was one long stroke following her hair around her skull. It appeared to be knitted together by loving hands, like a quilt made for a baby's birth. The night I had first met Molly was a good one. The whole friend group was relieved to hear that Richard had finally moved on from Chloe. He had spent years mourning their breakup, hoping to find a way to bring her back. Molly had been a breath of fresh air. She was the perfect match for Richard's moody persona. She was light and full. She also adored Richard. You could see that from the very beginning. Molly was short and slender with dark hair. She looked extremely similar to Chloe, but we all brushed this aside, just assuming that Richard had a type. Her eyes were the most similar thing about them. They both had striking blue eyes. They were like looking into the sun, except they shone a rich and royal blue. That blue had faded from her eyes when I looked into them tonight. They had turned almost gray, yet they still remained fixed upon the photo. I began searching the apartment for anything that I could use to lure her out. In the front room I found an old dentist's chair, rusted and frayed with time. I could see fresh bandages and scalpels strewn across the floor. This is where he worked on her. The thought rang through my mind. I walked in and saw there were pictures of many sizes taped and strewn across the walls. All of them were of Chloe. Some were of Richard and her together. Others felt different. Some were shots of her in the mall, going to shops and eating. Others were far more personal. She was standing in her room. The photographs were obviously taken from a hidden location. Some seemed as innocent as you can be with these sorts of pictures. Her smiling in the mirror, brushing her teeth, talking on the phone and such. Others were not so innocent. Her changing, her scarlet hair against her pale skin, her lying in bed doing the things she would only do in the privacy of her own home. As I looked, I saw more of these. She was in bed with a mystery man. There were so many of these kinds. It was as if With every new night, the photographer grew closer and closer to her window. I could feel my skin crawl as I felt her space being invaded by an unwanted guest. The pictures began to become up close while she slept, and some were even of her feet as she hung them off the bed. The final picture was of just her red hair hanging off the bed. How could Richard do this? It made no sense. He couldn't hurt a fly. I knew it had hurt him to be left like that. He made sure to tell me in the nights after Chloe left. He seemed to think the world would never turn again, that his sun would never rise again. I would tell him, "Hey dummy, the sun rises every day." He would smile and agree, but I could see that he felt like his sun would never rise again. He lived with me for a couple of months after that. He seemed to be getting better as the days passed by. Or maybe I had selfishly convinced myself that he had. In the nights I could hear him shuffling around restlessly. I could hear the empty dialing of a phone. I chose to ignore those facts. I chose to believe it was something else. It was even easier to ignore the facts when he finally told me he would be moving out. I had hoped he had moved on, and I decided to move on as well. My friend is fine now. Cured. The door opened with a quiet click. My skin tensed as I heard the old hinges swing open and close slowly. The footsteps were light and careful, like those of a cat stalking its prey. I rushed towards the closet in the room and closed it behind me, careful not to make any noise. The closet was full of tufts of hair. I could see the kitchen from the closet. Standing at the counter, I saw him. Richard. He looked just like my friend, but I saw him in a different light. His eyes were dark, and I could see a deep desire burning behind them. I had thought that was his desire to make a better life. I suppose he never told me he wanted a better life. It was the idea I had implanted into my own head, and made to be true. He placed the camera that was around his neck on the counter and washed his face at the sink. Once finished and dried, he called out, "Chloe, baby, I'm home." My stomach turned. "Oh yay, sweetie," a voice called from the back room. He walked into the back room, his eyes scanning the apartment as he did. I heard her embrace him with pursed lips. "I need a shower. Wait for me when I'm done, will ya, love?" Richard asked in a soft, pleasing way. "Of course, my love. Let me know if you need company," Molly said with a sensual undertone that turned my stomach. Once I was sure he was in the shower, I rushed into the room and found her sitting and staring just like before. "We have to go now," I whispered to Molly. "We can go to the police and they can take you far away from him." She slowly turned and looked at me, her eyes and smile wide. I could see where the cuts made her lips pull unnaturally against her teeth. Her teeth sat in near perfection, minus a slight change in angle. "I will never leave my little Ricky," she said with an iron tone. My guilt was immeasurable. I had heard this monster's birth and done nothing. I had ignored his pain just so I could get a full night's sleep. I had to end this. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. I had to end this. The handle was cold, the tip was heavy. My legs felt like lead. The bathroom was steamy. Richard hummed as he washed his hair, unaware of my presence. I raised the knife above my head, heart pounding in my ears. A cold pain sifted its way through my side. I fell to the ground, caught by a pair of arms. A hand wrapped around my mouth to muffle the sounds of my pain. I had been dragged back into the room that held Molly. She had pulled me out, a bloody scalpel between her teeth. "You can't ruin this," she whispered in my ear. "I'm almost ready to be shown to the world." My heart sank. "I asked for this," she said, looking down at her newly shaped hands. "I always knew that my sister was perfect, and now he's making me perfect just like her," she said, looking deep into my eyes. Her glowing blue had returned. The water stopped and her head turned to see Richard exiting the shower. I took that moment and ran. I ran as far as my hurting body would take me. I moved as far away as I could. I erased everything I could from that night. I always ran from the real Richard. This was always my fault.